There was a story in the Wall Street Journal about a week ago, actually it was a few weeks ago. It's February 26th, excuse me, and I'm looking at it right here. And it was about an exclusive dinner earlier that month with hedge fund titans, CAC Capital Advisors, Soros Fund Manager. It was hosted by a boutique investment bank. I'm quoting from the Wall Street Journal here, an article by Susan Pulliam, Kate Kelly, and Carrick Mullenkamp. Hosted by a boutique investment bank at a private townhouse in Manhattan. And this meeting is very troubling. Webster Tarpley is with us. Webster Tarpley is an author, a historian, a journalist, a lecturer. His website, Tarpley, TARPLEY.net. He's got a PhD. Dr. Tarpley, welcome to the program.
Thank you very much.
You're a keen observer of the economic scene. When you learned that these hedge funds were meeting in private in New York City, and I was going to say in secret, but a couple of them spilled the beans to the media. It's right here in this story in the Wall Street Journal what they were planning to do, and this was back in mid-February, and we're seeing it right now in Europe. What went through your mind, and tell us about what they said they were going to do.
Well, there had been numerous indications that the hedge funds and the zombie banks, I would call them hedge fund hyenas and zombie banks, were regrouping for an attack. And this started really around Thanksgiving of last year when Dubai essentially went bankrupt and raised this issue of sovereign debt, the debt of different countries. And already in December, you could see the Wall Street Journal writing about this. Part of it is a geopolitical purpose. In other words, the dollar was collapsing last autumn at a very rapid rate. And some of these people in Wall Street decided that for strategic reasons, for power reasons, they needed to make the euro collapse faster than the dollar in order to make the dollar look good and maintain the reserve status of the dollar. But also,
is that also in part because they're based in the U.S. and they're trading in dollars, and so it's better to have a strong currency if you're going to rip off the rest of the world?
The idea is that it's the hedge funds based in Wall Street and the City of London that are doing most of this stuff. But then, of course, they all pile in individually for reasons of money. The gang that met at Moness, Crespi, and Hart, which is this boutique townhouse that they write about in the Wall Street Journal. They are largely the people who brought down Lehman Brothers. Lehman Brothers was probably bankrupt anyway, but the way it went bankrupt was through an attack by these hedge funds. So they looked at the euro and they said, how can we attack the euro? The euro is too big for a direct assault, so we've got to find some weak points and weak links, and they focused on the bond markets of the southern tier of Europe, from Greece over to Italy, Spain, Portugal, and Ireland too. And they then used credit default swaps as a means of shorting the bonds of these countries.
Something that has been referred to as nuclear weapons of mass, financial weapons of mass destruction. Yeah,
that's what Warren Buffett says. Except then he turned around and dealt in derivatives with Goldman Sachs.
That's how he makes his living.
Right. So, but I think this also points to the nature of the problem. This is not because of the pensions in Greece or the working conditions or the fact that they're fortunate enough to have militant trade unions that try to defend the standard of living. Right. This is purely pretextuous. In other words, this is an orchestrated attack by speculators of the most predatory sort. And I'm afraid what the Europeans have done overnight is all in the wrong direction. The most elementary thing you have to do here is that if you're under attack by hedge funds, you have to ban hedge funds, and that what it simply means is regulate them. Remember, the essence of the hedge fund is that they fly beneath the regulations of.
No, I get that, but how can the Euro and what we have here is a wolf pack attacked by these largely U.S.-based, some London-based hedge funds who are going after Greece, and then they have declared that after that they're going to go after Spain, Ireland, and Portugal, and excuse
me, they've actually declared more. They've said that they're going after all sovereign debt. So that means California, New York, the Port Authority, ultimately the United States Treasury. And I think the issue that it raises is either the sovereign state will crush these zombie banks and hedge fund hyenas, or the zombie banks and the hedge fund hyenas are going to destroy what we would normally think of as modern civilization. They're simply going to reduce the world to neo-feudal chaos.
Or maybe they'll blow up all the federal banks and sovereign nations will go back to minting their own currency and maybe even to a gold standard of some sort, and some good might come out of this.
Well, the problem is that a chaotic collapse of the current institutional arrangements is the last thing anybody should want.
Yeah, you're right.
You're
right. Typically what that leads to is fascism.
I'm afraid so. So the idea is what we would need right now is if you go back 79 years, in a parallel crisis to this, really, Europe was collapsing in the summer of 1931.
Right.
Herbert Hoover, of all people, Herbert Hoover had the good sense to come out and say, let's take all the existing financial debt of Germany, France, Britain, and the United States and freeze it. In other words, today it would be the equivalent of the U.S. government saying, we will support and favor debt freezes by Greece, Spain, Portugal, Italy. In other words, it's impossible to pay these debts. Ireland, Iceland, Latvia,
right.
Many other countries, the Eastern Europeans who already had to go to the IMF last fall, right? Hungary, Belarus, Ukraine, many others. They all need a debt freeze. They need a debt moratorium. And the other thing, of course, is this $1.5 quadrillion derivatives bubble. We should remember that derivatives were illegal under the New Deal
until
from
2000.
1936 until 1982, when Reagan began the slow process of rehabilitating derivatives. We should go back to a
82?
situation.
I thought it was 2000 with the Commodity Futures Modernization Act that derivatives became legal.
Here's the problem.
What happened in 82?
That was Reagan doing the first step. There are actually three phases. There's Reagan in 1982. Then there's Wendy Graham at the end of the first Bush the Elder administration,
right.
And then there's finally the definitive legalization in 1999. So the onus, the idea that derivatives were illegal was so widespread and institutionalized. They were so dubious that it took three waves of effort by these deregulation privateers to actually reintroduce them. And since then, we've now got $1.5 quadrillion of derivatives crushing the world.
Right, 1,500 trillion, and the entire GDP of the planet is 66 trillion. We're talking
Precisely.
We're talking to Webster Tarpley. Tarpley.net is his website, about the hyena attack, the wolfpack attack that has been explicitly launched. I mean, not even in secret. These guys, this is an opportunity to make a lot of money, says Hans Hufschmidt, a former senior Salmon Brothers executive who now runs Globe Op Financial Services SA, a hedge fund administrator in London and New York. I mean, that's a verbatim quote from the Wall Street Journal. These guys are coming out and bragging about the fact that they're going to take down individual European countries so that they can put $1 billion paycheck in their own fat pockets. Webster Tarpley, we have less than a minute left. What would you suggest? You said, Europe should ban hedge funds. How does Europe ban American hedge funds?
Well, there's a proposal in front of the European Parliament today that a hedge fund that wants to operate in Europe should have a passport. The problem is that this process that they've started today takes a couple of years. They need an emergency ban. I would urge French President Sarkozy, who has the most emergency powers of basically anybody under the Fifth Republic. Sarkozy should come out with an immediate emergency decree. Hedge funds are banned. Credit default swaps are banned. Credit default swaps means you're selling insurance without meeting the legal requirements to be an insurance company. Right. So ban those. Impose a 1% transfer tax, a Tobin tax on all transactions, and separate banking from derivatives in general.
From your lips to God's ears. Webster Tarpley, Tarpley.net. Great to have you on, sir. Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Thanks for sharing your time with us.